Candidates, the takeaway is clear. You are a biological transducer for source flow. Attention candidates, this is Multitude News Special Report. We are entering Protocol 5, the Master Schematics. Up until now, we've given you tactical tools. Today, we give you the map. Our analysts have decrypted a 36-minute briefing on metaphysical cartography. This is the geography of the soul. It explains why our system glitches, how your shadow is actually a series of isolated villages running outdated survival codes, and why darkness is simply a failure of circulation. Warning, this data is high density. Stabilize your vertical axis before proceeding. Let's look at the schematic.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have received some deep, dense, and frankly, pretty challenging source material today.
It's definitely not your standard document.
No. It feels less like traditional research and much more like a metaphysical cartography of the self.
I like that. Metaphysical cartography.
Yeah, it's like part philosophical exploration, part, I don't know, poetic zine.
And part structural map of consciousness itself. It's got layers.
It really does. And the mission it sets out for us is, well, it's profound. We're being asked to do a deep dive into darkness.
Right, but not darkness in the simple good versus evil sense.
Exactly. It's asking us to move past those simple moral dualities, to understand a concept of darkness that's rooted in, what is it? Separation, fear, and these very specific power dynamics.
Yeah. And the goal here, I think, is really practical for you, the listener. It's about decoding what true darkness is, how it shows up inside of you, how it manifests externally, all so that you can find a kind of personal balance.
Yes. It's about trying to illuminate the shadows we all carry, and also the shadows we encounter out there in the world.
Precisely. And we're working with 3 really layered sections to map this whole journey out.
Okay, let's lay them out.
So first, we get this almost cosmic vision of duality and what it calls primal darkness.
Okay, the big picture.
The biggest picture. Then second, the source provides this almost mechanical description of what it calls source's flow.
Flow with the capitals.
Yeah.
It feels like it's suggesting an authentic, expansive current.
And then when it writes flow in lowercase,
It feels like something lesser, something constrained or corrupted.
it's a purposeful signal. It's guiding our interpretation. And that leads to the third part, which is an analysis of that very corruption, the twisted flow.
Right. And what feels so crucial here is that this material isn't trying to, eliminate darkness. It's not a guide to getting rid of your shadow.
No, not at all. It's about integration. The core challenge here is one of critical self-examination. It's asking us to move past that superficial fear of the shadow to confront what's truly blocking our connection to. I'm quoting here, this natural mycelium web of flow that connects all conscious life.
That's a beautiful image.
Isn't it? It suggests that we have to face the darkness of separation within ourselves first before we can even begin to address it in the larger world. It all starts inside.
Okay, so let's start where the source does, right at the top, at the cosmological beginning, because it doesn't waste any time.
No, it dives right in. It sets the stage for existence with these almost scriptural statements about unity and separation.
It's like it's providing the philosophical foundation for everything that's about to come.
Exactly. The exploration starts not with a physical origin, like a Big Bang, but an energetic one. It grounds everything in this idea of unity before duality ever expresses itself.
So the origin point is our anchor. And the first line is, from source we expressed, duality was born. That one line tells us that the world of opposites we live in, light and dark, up and down, finite and infinite, it's not an error. It's not a mistake.
It's a necessary dynamic outcome. It's what happens when a unified whole tries to express itself into a tangible reality.
And this connects directly to that ancient philosophical idea it references right after that.
The Tao that can be named is not the Tao.
Exactly. So if the ultimate unity, the source, the Tao, whatever you want to call it, is limitless and complete,
then by definition, it's beyond our ability to fully grasp it. Our finite language, our minds, they just can't define it wholly.
the moment we try to name it or describe it or manifest it,
We create a boundary. And that boundary is the birth of duality. You create this, which automatically creates not this.
so the original unity is unnameable, but its expression, And Source talks about a map of 13D multiverse expression. That expression immediately creates a split.
It gets very specific. It says the 12Ds split into two.
Now, for you listening, you might not be fluent in, let's say, dimensional cartography. So what's the practical takeaway here? What does that specific split mean for us in our daily lives?
I think the practical implication is just this. We live in the split. We are constantly experiencing the tension of those two halves.
Yeah.
If you think of the whole universe as this continuous stream of energy, or source, the 12D split, is just the moment that stream broke into two primary opposing currents. You need that for manifestation.
Like a positive and negative charge in a battery.
Exactly. Or what we often conceptualize as feminine and masculine, light and dark. We are the products of this internal schism. We contain both.
And if we are the products of that split, then the instruction from the Source becomes really clear. It says, to come home, is it to accept both as self? So the journey back to unity isn't about eliminating one side. It's not about eradicating every negative emotion or every shadow aspect you have.
No, it's about recognizing that the light and the dark aspects within you are both equally necessary expressions of that original foundational split. They both belong.
So integration, not elimination. That's the path to wholeness.
It has to be. Because if you resist one side of your own duality, you're effectively fighting against reality itself. Duality is the fundamental condition of our experience here.
And that resistance,
Yeah.
that's what the Source material is about to define as the root of true darkness.
Precisely. This is the transition. We're moving from a cosmic philosophical idea of duality to a more ethical, psychological concept of darkness.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. What defines the dark spectrum according to this text?
This is maybe the most vital definitional shift in the whole document. Darkness isn't just the absence of light. It's defined as an active condition of separation.
Active condition, okay.
The Source gives three main characteristics. First, ill will. Second, power over.
Power over. We'll come back to that one, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And third, and this is the most fundamental one, separation from the natural mycelium web of flow that connects all to the web of one consciousness.
I really want to focus on that mycelium web of flow. That's such a beautiful and tangible analogy. What does that tell us about the nature of connection?
Well, think about a forest floor, right? Below all the plants you can see there's this vast hidden network of fungi, the mycelium.
Right.
And it connects the roots of every single tree. It shares nutrients, water, even information. That network is the web of one consciousness in this analogy.
So flow, or connection, means your personal energy thread is actively sharing, receiving, and communicating through that network.
Yes. And darkness, then, is the act of severing that thread, of pulling yourself out of the network.
So ill will and power over are just the symptoms of that severing.
Exactly. If I feel separate, if I feel like a finite, isolated island, then of course I'm going to try and assert power over others or my environment.
Because you have to secure resources. You don't trust the shared flow of the collective anymore.
You can't. You've cut yourself off from it. So power over becomes a strategy born out of existential fear, not genuine strength.
Okay, so then contrast that with the light spectrum. What is light in this model?
It's defined by life, connection, relationship. And then this line, always a we within the me, a balance of us and I.
A we within the me. I love that. So the insight here is that the dark is fundamentally about disconnection and coercive control. It's the insistence on the I above all else, whereas light is relational consciousness. It's the constant affirmation that the self, the me, or the I is interdependent and only truly thrives within the context of the collective, the we or us.
And that relational quality means that true strength comes from surrender to the larger shared reality. Separation leads to antagonism, to fighting. Connection implies shared abundance and an inherent reciprocity.
It really moves darkness out of the realm of, sin or morality and into the realm of a structural systemic failure to relate.
That's it, exactly. It's a systems problem.
Which brings us to the Source's most provocative philosophical claim, I think. The necessity of the void. The necessity of death.
This is where it gets really deep. It brings us back to the mechanics of that source energy, confirming that the flow is cyclical, not linear. It has to be.
And the Source uses a physical analogy that makes this cyclical need so clear. It says, the electricity of life itself does it not require the empty in order to be filled with a new charge. Emptiness, void.
It's so simple and so perfect. If you want a continuous current, you have to allow for the cycle of discharge and recharge. You can't just have charge, charge, charge.
If the source is infinite potential, it has to continuously create and then dissipate to make room for new creation.
Right. If nothing ever ended, if everything just stayed statically full, no new charge could ever enter the system. It would be stagnant.
Which leads to the stark conclusion in the text. Therefore, creation cannot not die. Therefore, there must be death in the plan.
Death isn't a bug in the system. It's a fundamental feature of the cycle. It's required for life to continue.
So this is where the fear shifts, right? If death is necessary for renewal, then why are we so violently afraid of it?
That's the million-dollar question, and the source has an answer. It says, perhaps the true darkness that is feared is the death that is not wanted by what is wanting life.
Wow. Okay, break that down.
This is the core psychospiritual insight of this whole section. The fear isn't of the act of dying itself. It's of the resistance within the ego.
The part of us that's conditioned to insist on its current form surviving above all else.
Yes. That resistance, that rejection of the natural void, the end of a cycle, whether it's the end of a phase in life, a job, a relationship, that desperate clinging.
That is the condition that breeds true darkness.
Exactly. It's the difference between acknowledging that something must end to allow for something new to begin and fiercely clinging to the familiar, even if it's become toxic or stagnant.
The moment you resist that necessary void, you are, in the source's terms, trying to cycle block source.
Yeah.
You're putting up a dam against the flow of reality.
And that resistance is it's exhausting. It takes so much energy, which is why the ultimate instruction is given. Accept death when it comes and stay in the light.
Which means embracing the natural ending, the completion of a cycle, while you're still maintaining your core connection, staying in that relational consciousness.
It's the ultimate act of trust. Trusting the flow rather than insisting on your personal control over the flow's direction.
Okay, so now we take that huge cosmological definition of darkness as separation and control, and we apply it directly to the human experience, specifically to our emotions.
Yes, and this is where it gets very personal for the listener. We need to distinguish between what the source sees as a primal necessary force and what it defines as a separative evil.
It's a critical distinction, because I think we often confuse intense, visceral, emotional expression with some kind of moral failure or true darkness.
We absolutely do, and the source really tries to guide us past that confusion.
It starts by using some very charged language to define the primal emotional body. It links it to the wild woman's soul essence emotional body water.
It's describing emotion as this powerful, circulating, elemental force. And water is the perfect metaphor for the emotional body, isn't it?
It really is.
It's essential for life, but it can be utterly unpredictable. It flows, it cleanses, but it can also flood. It can carve canyons through solid rock.
And when emotion is blocked, like water behind a dam, the pressure just builds and builds.
Mm-hmm. And the source draws a crucial distinction here about that pressure. It says, one thing that is known is that the rage within the deep feminine that may express with force to the point of appearing violent, that is not the darkness that is to be feared.
That feels like a profound moment of validation for a lot of people, I would imagine.
I think so. It confirms that primal, visceral rage, even if it appears forceful or aggressive to an outsider, is often the natural, healthy function of the emotional body. It's asserting a boundary or screaming for attention when a blockage has occurred.
So it's an honest, if intense form of life force, just trying to clear a path for itself.
That's the idea.
But I have to ask, doesn't that feel a bit dangerous? If we start accepting intense force as necessary, how do we stop that from sliding into a justification for genuinely harmful behavior?
That's the nuance, and it's a very important one. The source is so careful with its language, it uses the word appearing violent.
Oh.
The intensity is what others see. But the key distinction is always the intent. Is the intent to separate, to dominate, to inflict that power over we talked about? Because that is true darkness.
Or is the intent an explosive, authentic release aimed at restoring flow, clearing a block, asserting a necessary boundary for relational health?
Exactly. And if it's the latter, even if it feels terrifying in the moment, it's not the kind of separation that breeds true evil. It's actually an act aimed at restoring connection.
Okay, so if that primal rage isn't the darkness to be feared, what is?
Well, the source points the finger squarely at internal avoidance.
At ourselves.
At ourselves. The true fear, it says, lies in the ego that does not let her pain be graced with listening.
Wow. So that shifts the entire concept of darkness from some external conflict to an internal act of negligence. an act of avoidance.
We're supposed to fear the ego that refuses to listen to its own internal feedback system.
And the source tells us exactly what that listening provides. It says, the listening would inform the systems, personal and collective, and give the feedback necessary for inner and outer adaptation.
Pain is pure data. That's all it is. It's information.
And if we turn off the signal because we don't like the sound, we lose our ability to adapt. We become structurally rigid, brittle.
Think about it in any system, like an organization. The moment a company stops listening to internal dissent or to the pain points of its customers, that feedback, it becomes stagnant, rigid, and eventually it becomes irrelevant.
On a personal level, if your body is giving you pain signals about stress, about burnout, and you just override them constantly with caffeine and willpower,
You are committing an act of separative negligence against your own system. You're treating a part of yourself as an other to be controlled.
and the source adds this really vital layer of compassion here by suggesting that this is often unintentional. It says, ignorance is generally the cause more often than conscious censorship.
It's not always malicious. Often it's just a lack of attention, a failure to slow down and observe our inner world. Or maybe just a simple, terrified inability to adapt. It's passive avoidance that lets this feared darkness grow.
That inability to listen, whether it's conscious or ignorant, leads to a fear of adaptation. And the source brings it all back to that theme of self-facing as the antidote.
Right. It says to understand the darkness of the other, one must meet them within themselves.
So we can only accurately identify that separative behavior out in the world if we're honest about where we too refuse to listen and adapt internally.
It's the only way. Otherwise, you're just projecting.
So this internal failure to adapt, to listen, it leads to this operationalized state of separation, which the source then defines as evil. What exactly is this specific kind of evil?
This is a form of self-preservation that has been perfected through denial. The darkness to be feared is the evil that points outside of itself to misguide the looker in an attempt at self-preservation.
So it's the ultimate refusal of internal responsibility. It's deflecting the light of awareness onto an external scapegoat to avoid looking at yourself.
Yes. And this denial, when it becomes collective, it can become a dense, living force. The source says the conditioning of separation, pain-based, that itself becomes an egregore, a point of agency within the field of calming spheres of consciousness of the human biome.
Okay, that is some heavy jargon. Let's break down that concept of the egregore for the listener.
In simple terms, an egregore is a collective, autonomous thought form. It's what happens when a thought or an emotion gains a kind of critical mass.
Like a shared habit of pain that takes on a life of its own.
Exactly. When enough people operate from the same place of unlistened pain and separation, say a culture of blame or a deep-seated national fear, that shared energy actually coalesces. It becomes its own entity in the psychic field.
So if a family or a political group or even a whole corporate culture collectively decides that their survival depends on never being wrong and always blaming an outsider,
That collective denial itself gains a life. It gains agency.
and the source gives us that egregore's agenda. It says it carries the agency of not wanting to be responsible if it means suffering for self.
Which is the collective manifestation of that resistance to the void-death cycle we talked about right at the start. It's an entity whose sole function is the denial of consequence. And it achieves that by perpetually redirecting everyone's gaze outward. Look over there, not here.
But the ego, which is the mechanism that creates and feeds this egregore, it's not presented as a lost cause. The source emphasizes that the ego must be taught adaptation.
It's not the enemy, it's a program.
It says the ego is made of the totality of the consciousness sphere and can be updated.
That's the hope this material offers. The ego is a program, it's a necessary filter, and programs can be rewritten with new codes. And this is where that simple, concrete analogy comes in that makes this whole abstract concept so useful.
The dog analogy.
The dog analogy. Like a dog, you train it to protect what you want, not what your past interpretations of life have stored in the villages of your unconscious.
Stop the feed. This is critical field manual update. Your ego is not your enemy. It's your canine security detail. If it's barking at ghosts from 10 years ago, it's not evil. It's just running an old script. You are the handler. Update the code. Give the dog a new mission.
That analogy just lands so well. The ego's function is vital, it's protection, But if it's protecting outdated conclusions,
Right. If the dog is still guarding the burnt-down house from a fire that happened 10 years ago.
then it's actively hindering your present-day flow and your ability to adapt.
Yeah.
So we have to become the conscious trainers of our own ego, uploading intentions that align with connection, not just with historical pain.
Yes, exactly.
This discussion of the ego as a program, it takes us so seamlessly into the mechanics of source flow. This is where the deep dive shifts from philosophy into something more like electrochemistry.
I think so, yeah. It asks, how does this vast cosmic energy actually interact with our physical electrical bodies?
It starts treating the human being as this miraculous piece of technology, a system designed specifically to transduce and filter this incredibly high-density energy into usable biological data.
It's a fascinating perspective.
The source explains that source energy has many frequencies and densities, and that it comes and pours within the human, giving it life and movement.
Which suggests we're continuously saturated by this energy. We're constantly being charged, whether we're aware of it or not.
And the human vehicle needs a specific internal mechanism to manage that charge without, blowing a fuse.
And that's where the source details the role of Kundalini energy serpent, evolutive essence of nature, that pulses a current though our electromagnetic system.
Okay, so for anyone unfamiliar with that term, Kundalini is often thought of in mystical or yoga traditions as this coiled spiritual energy at the base of the spine.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's being defined more as the fundamental current, the serpent evolutive essence of nature that runs through our entire electrical architecture.
It's the engine. It's the engine that activates the chakra system and all these other ethereal channels. And those systems, they aren't just abstract points of light, they're transformers.
Transformers.
They transform the raw force of source into data pulses within the various systems of the human physical body via electrical impulses and the hormonal glandular system.
So high-frequency spiritual energy becomes neurological signals and hormonal releases.
Yes. The vast cosmic intelligence of source flow gets broken down, stepped down, into usable physical data that governs our mood, our metabolism, our conscious thoughts.
This is so key. When the source talks about disconnection, it's not just a spiritual feeling, it's an actual electrical issue.
It has to be. If this flow is blocked, say, by a dense, unadapted ego program, the body itself suffers. It could lead to stagnation, illness, erratic energy, because that natural current is unable to fully circulate and transform into healthy physical data.
We are quite literally electrochemical consciousness systems.
That's what the source is proposing.
But this pure source flow, it doesn't just enter us untouched. The source is very clear that we are a filtering system.
Precisely. The life force, which is expressed so beautifully in nature's fractal growth systems, it is therefore filtered by the human via its own electrical system. It's our human consciousness that determines the quality and the final translation of that force.
And the components of that filter are defined as the mental body, the psyche, and the ego.
So our current conclusions about reality, our psychological makeup, our conscious and unconscious thought patterns, they are actively shaping the incoming life force moment by moment.
And the ego, which we already identified as the key player in resisting the void, gets its mechanical description here. It is a densified version of the many programs running in the background.
So it's not a single entity. It's the accumulated result, the densification of our lived experience, our cultural conditioning, our survival strategies.
And those programs are vast. Conscious thought, unconscious beliefs, those automatic and semi-automatic subconscious actions, and even our physiological responses.
Which means the ego is the primary gateway. It's the operator at the switchboard. And if those underlying programs are running outdated codes based on pain and separation,
then the pure flow will be corrupted. It'll be twisted before it can even express itself authentically in our lives.
Exactly. If the core program running says, the world is fundamentally unsafe and you are alone, then the incoming source flow, which is pure connection and love, will be filtered and distorted into fear, contraction, and suspicion.
The ego is the operator, determining what data gets through and in what form.
Yes.
This concept of the ego as a densified program leads us right into the most detailed and I think the most actionable metaphor in the entire source material, the sphere of consciousness.
This is the practical application of everything we've just talked about. It's a detailed map of our internal world.
And it provides you, the listener, with a way to actually locate where those outdated programs are running in your own system.
It's a path to self-awareness. The sphere of consciousness, which it says is our auric field, globally and universally connected, is mapped here into 3 territories.
And the divisions are based on how easily we can access the contents. So the conscious territory is the aspects seen by us. It's what we are actively aware of right now.
Then you have the unconscious. This is the largest territory made up of aspects not seen by us. This is the deep, deep archive of everything we've filed away, suppressed, or just forgotten.
And bridging those two is the subconscious, the aspects almost visible to us.
It's like the lobby, or the waiting room between the two.
And critically, the source says these territories have boundaries and protectors of those boundaries, which emphasizes that access is not easy. You can't just walk into the unconscious.
No, you can't. And those protectors are the mechanisms of the ego we've been talking about. Our fear responses, our defense mechanisms, our internal gatekeepers. They're all designed to maintain the status quo and prevent psychological pain.
So if a painful memory from the unconscious tries to cross that boundary into the subconscious lobby, a protector like, say, a jolt of shame or intense anxiety slams the door shut.
Right. It's doing its job. It's ensuring that the existing programs, the familiar pain, remains undisturbed by new, potentially disruptive information.
So if the whole healing process requires adapting and updating those old programs, the very first step is learning how to deal with those boundary protectors.
They are the ones resisting the flow. They exist because at some point letting that pain in was dangerous. So we have to learn to dialogue with them, to reassure them, not just fight them.
And within these territories, especially the unconscious, the source introduces another vivid metaphor: villages with residents.
This is where the concept of stored trauma really comes alive for me.
Me too?
The residents of these villages are aspects of ourselves. They are our conclusions, our personal interpretation of memories, traumas, unresolved situations that live in a space out of time within your sphere of consciousness.
So it's not just a file in a cabinet. It's an entire ecosystem frozen in a specific moment from the past.
Yes, a living community.
That is such a profound idea. For you listening, this means when you have that disproportionate reaction to a small trigger,
Yeah.
that's not really you reacting in the present moment.
No, that's the village of scarcity from your childhood, running its old cultural programming from 15 years ago.
And each of these villages has its own culture, a set of prevailing attitudes and trauma-based responses that creates what the source calls a hermetic layer.
A hermetic layer. It's a shield, a closed circuit that repels any new information or technologies, as the source calls them.
So if a village's core culture is, I am unlovable, any new data, like a genuine compliment from a friend or a major success at work, will just bounce off that hermetic shield.
It has to, because that new information contradicts the prevailing culture of the village. It's a threat to its existence.
So these closed circuits are running in the background of our lives, consuming our energy, and actively blocking the entry of new source flow, which is inherently expansive and connective.
And we only become aware of them because life acts as a mirror. The outside world shows us our inside world.
If you repeatedly find yourself in the same kind of dysfunctional relationship, or you constantly self-sabotage right before a major success.
That behavioral pattern is the external expression of a hidden village's culture. Life is holding up a mirror to show you where your energy circuits are stuck on a loop.
Which is why the source says slowing down and observing the peripheral view of your life is the only way to even see the gates of these villages.
You have to. It sounds like a kind of spiritual archaeology. We have to dig up these old communities to introduce them to the 21st century.
I like that spiritual archaeology. And the source provides a clear, actionable path for this work. It all starts with deceleration.
Yes, slowing down. The process begins when an individual slows down and starts paying attention to the peripheral view of their actions.
Because we're all moving too fast to see the boundaries. We can't even see the outlines of our own shadow self.
And slowing down allows you to enter the lobby of the subconscious. And from there, you can observe the shadow self, not as some evil entity to be destroyed.
No, but as the accumulated imprint that this unconscious, village-driven behavior is leaving on your life and your relationships.
It's the observable evidence. It's the data that proves those closed circuits are running in the background.
And the reward for just entering that lobby, for just being willing to look, is immediate. It allows the life force of love that is consciousness to start to trickle in.
And again, love here isn't sentimentality. It's pure, intelligent, expansive source flow.
As this new data, this love consciousness is processed, the human electrical system starts to adapt. But adaptation requires very specific intentional conditions.
It does. It requires healthy, grounded, neutral space, for expansion and for deeper downloads of what it calls healing templates.
If you try to do this deep healing work in a state of chaos and stress, the system just overloads.
And it defaults right back to the old familiar protective ego programs. It's too much, too soon.
Which is why the Source stresses movement so much. It says to avoid solely mental therapies, the body needs to move and emotions need to circulate.
If the energy is stuck in those hermetic villages, it's often physically stuck in the body. In your tissues, in your posture.
So the physical circulation, moving your body, allowing emotions to flow like that water we talked about, is crucial for helping the electrical system expand and liberate that stuck energy.
And the analogy for the villagers themselves is just beautiful. Circulating the energy gives them updated news about the world.
It's like you're finally delivering mail to these isolated villages. If the village's scarcity is operating on the old conclusion that resources are limited and you must hoard,
the new movement, the new connection introduces the new flow. It's a new news bulletin that says, hey, actually resources are abundant and you are connected to the flow now.
and that new information allows the village culture to finally update its protection mechanisms and start to dismantle those hermetic layers. It feels safe enough to change.
It's a process of re-education.
So what does all this mean if we fail? If we fail to listen to our pain, fail to adapt the ego, and fail to allow that source flow to circulate?
Well, then we arrive at the opposing force. We arrive at the twisted flow.
And the twisted flow is basically separation made operational. It's the direct consequence of resisting the cycle of death, denying internal pain, and asserting control over reality.
It's the system running on all the old corrupted code.
The source lists some very powerful characteristics for this state, starting with Antichrist energy. We should probably clarify that this is not a religious term here.
No, not at all. It's an energetic one. We should interpret Antichrist energy as fundamentally anti-integrative.
Okay.
If Christ consciousness, or source flow, is about connection, expansion, and unconditional love, then this energy is defined by its opposites: opposition, contraction, and conditional existence.
It's also characterized as being externalized energy, the ultimate projection of responsibility outward.
And of course, there it is again, the ever-present power over energy.
The psychological separation is made so clear. I with no us energy and the I above the we.
It is the direct opposite of the definition of light, which was the we within the me. This is hyper-individualism taken to its destructive extreme.
It's that narcissistic competitive stance. My survival depends solely on my own hoarding and control of my conditions.
But, and this is so important, the source is nuanced enough to show that the twisted flow also includes the opposite extreme.
Right. It's not just the selfish person. It's also the we before the I, or the sacrifice of personnel will to an outer authority.
That's a crucial point for you to catch as you're listening. Both extremes are a problem. The isolated narcissist and the person who completely abdicates their will to an authoritarian system or a church or a leader, both are deviations from authentic flow.
Because when you sacrifice your personal will, you block the unique fractal expression of source that you are meant to channel into the world.
You're trying to force yourself back into an artificial, rigid definition of unity, which is actually just another form of separation from your true self. Authentic flow requires that delicate balance of us and I.
The psychological error that's embedded in this twisted flow seems to be rooted in a really dysfunctional relationship with time.
It does. It's characterized by an impatience and an arrogant view of nature's cyclical rhythms.
It's the refusal to accept that things take time, that growth requires fallow periods, that every success requires a predecessor cycle to die off first.
And that impatience is what fuels that dangerous paradox the source mentions. A love that controls, a love that thinks it is nurturing but is actually blocking nature.
That is so recognizable in personal relationships. The parent, the partner, the friend who insists their way is the only right way, and they believe they're offering love.
But what they're actually doing is crippling the other person's ability to move through their own natural cycles of learning and growth.
It's conditional affection disguised as care, and the core resistance of the twisted flow is revealed in its defiance against natural limitations. The flow mantra is, don't cycle block source.
But the resistance, the twisted part, replies, you can't tell me what to do, I'm not eternal anymore. It's a tantrum against mortality.
That defiance, that resistance to being finite, forces the creation of a closed system. And the source lays out the physics of this separation so clearly. It says, to be finite is to be conditional. It's physics.
We can't escape it. Since we exist in duality, we are conditional beings, period.
And if you deny that conditionality, you step out of the relational flow. The text says, to exist in separation is to leave. Source, it's electric.
You are literally severing your thread from that mycelium web. You're unplugging yourself.
And this severance leads directly to the desperate, self-justifying imperative that defines the entire twisted flow mindset.
Which is, therefore I must consume to survive. I create and control my conditions.
And that right there is the intellectual and energetic justification for all power over systems, whether they're political, interpersonal, or just internal. It's the logic of separation.
And that brings us to the final synthesizing contrast. This is the ultimate metric for you, the listener, to use to evaluate your own behavior and your own internal systems.
The two opposing states of being, they offer a clean, actionable distinction. On one side, you have the state of separation, fear, and power over. That's the twisted flow.
And it operates under the principle, I create and control my conditions, I dictate reality, and I fight everything that opposes my dictates.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have the state of acceptance, connection, and that deep relationship, the we within the me. That is the authentic with flow. And it operates under a totally different principle.
Which is?
I create and co-create with us the conditions.
Wow. That's the entire lesson distilled right there, isn't it?
I think it is.
Are you fighting the current of reality?
Yeah.
Desperately trying to impose your finite will on everything? Or are you adaptive? Are you flowing alongside the current, collaborating with the conditions, the light, the dark, the creation, and the necessary death, knowing that you are inherently a part of and connected to the source of it all?
That choice, moment by moment, determines whether the energy that's channeled through your system becomes pure connection and healing or corrupted control and chronic self-sabotage. It dictates which culture is running the show in your unconscious villages.
What an incredible cartography of the self. Just, wow. We started by grounding darkness not as some moral failing, but as separation and power over. A deep resistance to the necessary cycle of death and renewal that source flow requires.
And we made that critical distinction that necessary emotional force, like rage, is not true evil. Evil is the operationalized separation of the unlistened ego, the part that refuses responsibility and points outward to survive, creating those collective pain habits, the egregores.
And then we mapped our own internal landscape, understanding that source flows through us as electrical data, and that it's filtered by our mental body, our psyche, and our ego. That densified collection of programs running in our unconscious villages of old trauma and outdated conclusions.
And the synthesis, the big takeaway, is that finding balance means shifting from that controlling, twisted flow, where we desperately try to control all the conditions of our lives, to the adaptive relational flow, where we learn to co-create with the conditions as they are.
And that requires continually slowing down, listening to and updating the codes of the inner self, liberating all that energy that's been stuck in those isolated villages for so long.
It's an ongoing process of inner diplomacy.
It is. The source material reminds us that the ego must be trained, like a protective dog, to guard what we want now, not what our past interpretations of life dictate. So for you listening, a final thought to take with you. If you accept that your unconscious is filled with these hermetic villages running on decades-old conclusions about safety and love, what specific actionable updated codes do you need to upload to those internal villages right now to align your internal protection system with the true, evolving nature of Source's flow? That is the work ahead.
Special report concluded. Candidates, the takeaway is clear. You are a biological transducer for source flow. If your villages are still hiding behind hermetic shields, you are invisible to the galactic mycelium. Your mission is to deliver the new news of connection to your internal fragments. Hello, 1212, can you hear me? This completes the core theory of the Species Readiness Protocol. Prepare for the final integration modules. This has been Multi-D News. Stay informed, stay aligned.